Timing is perfect, with Washington reportedly pressurising Australia to spend more on defence, and only this week a new security alliance reportedly being discussed in Shanghai by 23 countries including China, Russia, North Korea, Iran, India and Turkey. In addition, in the news this morning I noticed that China was to be showcasing its modern warfare kit in Beijing. For Rotarians and guests, please welcome Greg Russell.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for the opportunity to talk. As David mentioned, this is a presentation that I made a couple of months ago to our club in Stirling, and I'm just reminded how much activity has occurred in this general subject of defending Australia. Some of my colleagues have heard this before, and they've been kind enough to come down and hear it again today, so I thank them. Let me start with a summary, and I'll just make sure I press the right button. Yeah. Look, I've got 20 minutes, so I don't want to waste it. The world is now a very different place and a more dangerous place than it was 25 years ago. Seismic changes have occurred in global geopolitics and in the world economy. Hugh White, the eminent Australian defence and foreign policy strategist, has described the situation Australia now faces as the hard new world. For Australia, many challenges arise from what is now becoming a multipolar world. In the Asia-Pacific, China is rapidly becoming the dominant power, while concurrently the power and influence of the United States declines. There is enough evidence of China's capability and intent to conclude that it poses a serious risk to us, and we are not prepared. The key strategic issues from this global environment are as follows. First, Trump. He's changing America, and in his first 6 months, he has upended the system of Western alliances, caused major disruption to the international trade system, both of which have underpinned global stability since World War II. This has occurred during a period of serious deterioration in international security. The arms control architecture of the Cold War is now broken. Without the certainty of US security guarantees, countries like South Korea, Saudi Arabia, Poland, and even Japan are reportedly looking at acquiring nuclear weapons. With this uncertainty, an arms race has now begun, with global defence spending growing at 9% per annum, and this year will total $2.6 trillion. It's now a hard new world for Australia. The US under Trump is less reliable, and the threats in our region have become more immediate. The rules-based order has been replaced by transactional deals and threats based in large part on the whims and the flattery toward the US president. And as a result, confidence in America's direction, which was once critical for the maintenance of world peace and stability, has collapsed. Once Trump has left office, and that will be in 1,233 days, but who's counting, the damage to the alliance system is going to take years to fix, if at all. Allies have long memories. Just ask the Canadians about what it feels to become potentially the 51st state, or the Indians or the Brazilians who are suffering from now large US tariffs. For us, the threats have become more immediate, and our leaders have failed to make Australians aware of this hard world and the urgent decisions we now face. Those decisions are the most difficult foreign and defence policy challenges for decades, and they are twofold. First, we need to manage the relationship with our biggest trading partner, who also represents our biggest threat. And secondly, we need to manage the relationship with our most important military ally, who is less reliable, and do this while China and the United States are increasingly confronting each other. It will take careful handling, as we need to simultaneously retain our alliance with the US, build up our defence deterrent, manage our relations with China, and work with partners like Japan to establish a new order in Asia. It's not just a hard new world for Australia. Consider the profound impact on Europe of the Russian invasion of Ukraine. Almost all NATO countries have agreed to lift defence spending and to coordinate defence supply chains. And why have they done it? Because the US is now unreliable. France and the UK are talking about providing a nuclear deterrence for Europe, and Europeans are taking action to counter grey zone activities involving Russian sabotage, interference with undersea cables, cyber attacks, propaganda campaigns, and assassinations. This is occurring while Trump has been wavering from week to week, while he tries to impose a peace on Ukraine, and where he thinks he will become eligible for a Nobel Prize. Now to China. Economic growth in China since the 1980s has brought hope of regime change. While manufactured exports boomed, especially in from the early 2000s, it was accompanied by an alternate view of the world order involving IP theft, currency manipulation, circumvention of the World Trade Organization rules, and military build-up and coercion. In recent years, China has doubled down on support for Russia and the Ukraine. We're reminded of that by the events this week in China. And it conducts ongoing bullying of the Philippines in the South China Sea. The US withdraws behind tariff barriers and destroys the soft power it has built up over decades, China's influence is growing, and it is now leading the development of frontier industries like AI, quantum technology, and certainly EVs, solar technology. It is building capability to push the US out of the Indo-Pacific, starting with Taiwan, and doing it with a significant military build-up, especially involving its navy. In the past 15 years, there has been very large growth in China's military, and it's been accompanied by the promulgation of the 9-dash line, marking China's claims to large offshore areas and aggression in the South China Sea. China's navy is now the world's largest, certainly by numbers, but not yet by capability. But they're catching up. As an example, this picture is of the Liaoning, a 60,000-tonne conventionally powered aircraft carrier, one of 3 in service, with 3 more to be built before 2030. Carriers like this enable Chinese naval and air operations to extend into the Western Pacific, and we can expect more of this activity in our region. As part of that global maritime strategy, China has been investing in seaports and now has the interests in 129 of them, 14 of which are owned outright, 7 of which are capable of naval operations. The South China Sea is a long-running issue where China's claims of sovereignty to large areas border on Japan, the Philippines, Vietnam, Malaysia, and of course include Taiwan. China's claims have been rejected by the UN, but China has nevertheless built military bases on islands and shoals. It conducts ongoing air and maritime coercion with scores of incidents over recent years. These actions are primarily directed at the Philippines and at allied naval and air operations enforcing freedom of navigation exercises. These actions include dangerous flying, use of water cannon, ramming, and that sort of behaviour could easily lead to a miscalculation. Here's a closer look at the South China Sea and the 9-dash line in relation to the Philippines. And you can see to the west of the Philippines, sorry, can't quite reach, the Spratly Islands, which are the subject of hot contention. The proximity represents a major threat to Filipino sovereignty. Some examples of that coercion include Chinese fighter jets using flares in the path of Western surveillance aircraft, and water cannon. This is the Philippine Coast Guard getting well and truly drenched by 2 Chinese Coast Guard vessels. That's the context in which Australia finds itself. And what are we doing about it? So far, we've recognised the issue, but more urgent action is needed on the recommendations contained in the 2023 National Defence Statement, which noted a rapidly changing environment, heightened likelihood of conflict, an ADF not fit for purpose, the need to build deterrence capability, the need to engage more partners, and the need to make more ourselves. There are 3 likely areas of threat to Australia. The first is the China squeeze through interruption to Asia's sea lanes, such as the South China Sea, which represents 20% of global seaborne trade, and the sea lane approaches closer to us. We're very dependent on imported fuel. Secondly, cyber attacks targeting our communications and infrastructure, particularly our energy infrastructure. And thirdly, from China's Blue Water Navy, as its increased capability is now present to project precision, missile-capable force into the Pacific and the oceans that surround us. What could that projection of force look like? Just like China's circumnavigation of Australia last February, which included 5 live fire exercises in the Tasman Sea close to air routes between Australia and New Zealand. The ship that conducted the exercise, the Sun Yi, is a modern missile cruiser with 112 long-range land attack vertical launch systems. Our current ANZAC ships have 8 vertical launch systems. The research vessel in the bottom left has now made 2 voyages around Australia in the last 2.5 years. It's thought to be mapping undersea cables and surveying the Diamantina Trench off Western Australia. The ship is thought to have installed advanced sonar gear on the seafloor to enable tracking of submarines using Stirling Naval Base. The second threat is the US, and this would have been unimaginable 20 years ago. It's a major military ally, but led by an erratic president pursuing an American first agenda. The US alliance remains very important to us, and it needs to be very carefully managed. However, there's always a risk that despite our best efforts, we might catch Trump and Vance on a bad day. Looking at the recent experience the Europeans have had over the NATO treaty, it's reasonable to ask if we can still rely to the extent we have on the ANZUS treaty. And clearly, that answer is now in considerable doubt. Third threat is ourselves. We've largely been unaware of the hard new world. National leadership is needed to tackle these tough issues. I've mentioned the vulnerability of fuel supplies and cyber attacks, but the major risk is not moving quickly enough to build a stronger defence deterrent. Let's have a look at the numbers for a moment. These are the key numbers from the current 25-26 federal budget. The table on the right shows that if the budget was $100, then spending would be $37 on social security, $15.90 on health, which are both growing, and by comparison we spend $6.60 on defence. A major increase in the social security area has included the NDIS, which was forecast when it was introduced at $1.2 billion in 2012. Now it's $49 billion, with projections of it becoming $69 billion in the next few years. And at that level, it will exceed the defence budget of $59 billion. Now to AUKUS. Pillar 1, there are 2 pillars. Pillar 1 involves the acquisition of 3 to 5 Virginia-class nuclear-powered submarines, and this has arisen because there is a gap in our submarine capability caused by ongoing delays to making a decision about the Collins submarine life extension. Crew training is now underway. We have them serving, our people serving on US submarines. Rotational basing of US and UK submarines will begin from 2027 from Stirling in Western Australia. And the last part of the Pillar 1 is probably the biggest one, construction of the AUKUS submarines here in Adelaide, which is a major undertaking. Pillar 2 is hugely important as well. It involves acquisition of very advanced next generation technologies, including quantum technology, AI, advanced cyber systems, hypersonic technology, and so on. So nearly there. I want to believe in AUKUS because I think it could be a game changer for our defence deterrent and our relationships with the US, but we need a reality check. There are 5 risks that I think are really important. The first is we have a poor track record of acquisitions, and this one has a particularly long lead time. The second is the scale of the program in terms of the money, the workforce needed, and the time involved. Third, there is progressive impact of AUKUS, which is draining much needed funding from the rest of the defence portfolio. Then there is the current Pentagon review, and what that means for the broader US relationship. And finally, the need to build up and support by educating the Australian public and ensuring much closer scrutiny of these projects by our Parliament. And having said all that about risks, I would ask, just in case, is there a plan B? Additionally, while we manage AUKUS, we need to urgently upscale the ADF's operational readiness, and in doing so, we must learn everything we can from the experience in Ukraine. So here's a possible way forward, pulling all that together. First, the first issue is to review AUKUS and make a decision and educate the public. Secondly, review the Hunter frigate program, which is significantly over budget. Each ship is now expected to cost $9 billion, 7 years behind schedule, and once built, there are many who think these ships lack sufficient missile capability. Thirdly, prepare a new defence statement with a plan to reform and reorganise defence, and with firm updated decisions about required capabilities, priorities and accountabilities. Fourth, build relationships. There is no Asian NATO, and a lot more foreign policy work is needed to build defence partnerships, particularly with Japan and Korea, but also the Philippines, India and Indonesia. One positive recent discussion is to buy the Mogami frigates from Japan. It means a strengthening in our relationship as Japan builds up its defence capability. So, here are some takeaways. This is a critically important issue for Australia, and the public is largely unaware and, even worse, oblivious. Hard decisions are needed for this hard new world. Thank you.
Thank you, Greg, for that insightful and calm address on a very difficult subject. Do we have some questions? Please, Florian.
One question, one sentence. Yes. No thesis, please, in the question.
The question is, well, it can be very, well, sorry, my apologies. The question might be actually very short. What's the role of Indonesia in all of this?
Thank you.
Oh, good.
We've had a long history of relationship with Indonesia. It's no coincidence that the largest diplomatic mission Australia has overseas is in Jakarta. My son's there, that's the reason I know. We've spent a lot of time and effort, in a sense, below the waterline with the Indonesians, training them, engaging with their military. When I worked in the air traffic industry, we helped them train people to manage the air traffic that flew over their airspace, that also had a lot of Australians on board. So there are deep relationships there, but we need to continue to work at it. It is a growing economy. It's going to be one of the top 5, 6 economies in the world going forward, and it's right on our doorstep. So more work needed.
Rob.
Thank you very much for the talk. It's been very enlightening. Any comment on Taiwan, how close we are to a China takeover of Taiwan?
I mean, the short answer is who knows. There are people that say Xi has said 2027 he wants it done. The question would be how they might go about it. if they did. And there's a steady build-up of activity. For instance, the Philippines and the Americans have started to put missiles and those sorts of things on islands to the north of the in the Philippine archipelago. They probably won't have to invade. They could blockade and do that quite effectively. They've been practising, heavens knows, over flights. The many occasions where they've been putting pressure on the Taiwanese. Ultimately, the question's going to be how does the West respond? How does America respond? How do we respond? And I hope someone's thinking about all that.
Trump has been outright insulting to Australia. He's not even giving an appointment to the Prime Minister. So is it still worthwhile pursuing that relationship, or just saying, okay, you've done with it, we'll look at other options?
Thanks. Look, you may have got the impression that I have a fairly low opinion of the man, but I think we've got to look beyond that. We need to have engagement with the United States, but we need it in such a way that we're doing it from a position of more strength than we have now, while we retain our sovereignty. And we've got American Marines on rotation in the Northern Territory. Their aircraft use Tyndall, their ships and submarines increasingly going to use Sterling from next year in particular. We've got to, and our Defence Force has been engaged with them and folded into them in some respects. I think we've got to step back just a little as we build up our own, but keep them engaged. That's the issue.
I'm just wondering, I'm going to go home, pack my bags. What country should I move to? Because it hasn't been the most positive talk, very enlightening, but not so positive for our country.
I'm hopeful.
Fiji.
I'm hopeful that common sense will prevail and that we will recognise that there is a threat. Even if I've got this half wrong, I still don't want to be on the wrong side of it if something occurs. And I think we should be able to pressure our leaders to lead us, to educate the Australian public as to what the risk is, and do something urgently about building up our defence deterrent. Now, deterrence is all about getting the other guy to think carefully before they make an offensive move to you. And I think we've got that capability, certainly with the help of the Americans and others, and joining with countries like Japan. It's very, very important to us.
Yes, Greg, as a friend and colleague of Greg, of course, we've discussed this subject many times. One thing that I think we tend to forget, Greg has focused on the military aspect, particularly of China. If we think about the parallel, the economic, what's going on economically as well, it's not just making cheap goods. Look at what's happening with the so-called Belt and Road initiatives all around the world. The Chinese have a very nice expression, "ipu ipu," which means one step, one step. So step by step. And if we look at what's happening, they lend money to countries and they can't pay it back. Right, you can't pay it back? That's ours. Look at parts of Sri Lanka, I think, have fallen into that trap. And it's happening in Africa. So I think we need to be very concerned as well. I'm sorry, I'm just adding on to what Greg's saying. There's not really a question. Adding on to what Greg said, it's not just the military side, it's also the economic side, which is rumbling along underneath as well. And so be very aware of that. What we do about it, I don't know.
One more question. I wonder whether we have a fifth column in Australia. We have two ex-premiers currently in China applauding the regime, and we've had the port of Darwin sold to the Chinese. What is happening within the political environment?
I don't expect an invite to Beijing anytime soon, I can say that. I'm staggered that Carr and Andrew went. I really am. I just can't believe. I can't believe the world they're living in. I think there's a lot more public discussion needed in Australia to convince more people that we face a different hard world. And this is sort of an occasion where you start getting people to talk to each other about it. We need leadership, though. That's the issue. We really do need to be led. And I guess that's my final comment on the subject.